David Greene from Greene and Phillips Law Firm is back with us on Studio 10. Good to see you as always, David.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for stopping by. Now, this morning, you're going to explain to us what the word negligence means in legal terms. So, David, what is negligence?
Well, that's exactly right. Basically, what happens, people hear that word all the time, and they don't really know what it means. But basically, negligence is a legal term of art. The pattern jury charges basically say that it's a duty that someone owes another, perhaps not to hit them or not to run into them with a car, and then that duty is discharged. So, in other words, that's kind of fancy talk. For the bottom line is, if you hit someone and you hurt them, you owe them money. Okay, or if you owe them a duty such as to put a rail up properly, not to leave it loose, or some type of warning tape or something of that nature, if you don't do that and you cause an injury, then you could be held liable.
And I think we're kind of picking up on this by your description there, but how does negligence different? How is it different than intentional harm?
Well, that's a confusing area for people. Negligence is simply a duty that you owe. An intentional harm would be hitting someone with a stick, intentionally running over them with a car, that type of thing. So an intentional act versus not really an intentional, it's an unintentional act, but you're kind of lazy, not paying attention, using your cell phone when you shouldn't be, fooling with a radio.
Still responsible for it.
Absolutely responsible.
All right, so what sort of damages can be awarded in a negligence case?
Well, basically a negligence case, compensatory damages, your medical bills, your medical treatment, your lost wages, any incidental cost that you may have as a result of that event, they can be held responsible to pay you.
If you're hurt due to the negligence of another person, what are some of the options that you have at that point?
Well, from that point, you should always make sure you seek medical treatment, make sure you have the authorities called out to the scene, and make sure a report is done. And then from that point, you should seek legal advice from a qualified attorney.
Now, beforehand, you told me that Alabama is a contributory negligence state. Now, what does that mean exactly?
It complicates things. Basically, we're one of a couple of states in the entire nation. Contributory negligence means that if you're 1% at fault in an accident, or you're found to be 1% at fault, you recover nothing. So it's a little bit confusing. You think, gosh, they're 99% at fault. I'm only 1% at fault. They should owe me the difference. And that's not the case in Alabama. It's very important to make sure that if you're involved in an accident, do not talk to the other driver's insurance company. They're trained to ask you questions that can hurt your case. We've talked about that for a long time. A lot of times they'll ask you a question. They're interested in saving money for their insurance company. They may ask you a question. Do you think maybe you were just a little at fault? And a lot of people are going to be honest and say, well, gosh, maybe I was. And so then you set yourself up for failure.
All right, well, if you have any other questions about this or any other legal advice, you can always contact David Greene and his friends at Greene and Phillips. Thank you so much for coming in as always.
Thanks for having me.